Fabulous kayak business.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you, actually. Good morning, Ashlyn. So, welcome to, I can't believe we're saying this, February 5th, 2021. That is absolutely frightening that we're saying February. It seems I was just planning for Christmas and I'm not quite sure what happened. I blinked and January went away. So we now are back on our normal, if there is such a thing, schedule of Chamber Cafe being the first and third Friday of every month. And we'll stay on that schedule unless there's a conflict. And it's always from 10 to 11. And we always change the code. So if you try to use the old one, it won't work. And we were going to succumb to the permanent link until we sat in on two hijacked meetings and decided that we would just go through the drill and make you do it, and we apologize in advance, but way safer. Little bit of housekeeping. You probably noticed I muted all of you when you logged in, and that's to give you the opportunity to figure out what you wanted to do. And we love seeing you and hearing from you. We have about 35 people who signed up. Generally, we see 25 to 50% of the people who sign up have trouble getting in and or have things that come up. So we record this and then we put it up on our YouTube channel and send links out in e-blast. During the cafe, if you have questions, it's really helpful to put them into the chat, and that way everybody sees them at the same time and the right person can respond to it. And I know that if for some reason we run out of time at the end of the morning, that we'll keep those questions and circle back to you. So today we have the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building with Betsy Davis and her team, and she's got her board president, Sonia Matthews, and her boat building instructor, Leland Gibson, and her marketing manager, Laura Prendergast. And what we love, and we were just talking about this, is we have been doing so many workshops and classes to try to help businesses in the community pivot to work from what they were before the pandemic to a model that might work better after, that might help them improve their business, to grow it instead of living in fear about how they're going to survive, because that's possible. And I thought the best way for us to do that is to show some success stories. Then the Chambers one, we have a new model for this year, and it's being very well received. And the first one that came to mind was Betsy and wooden boat building. So with that, I'm going to turn this amazing pivot team over to Betsy and let her share the screen and control the meeting.
Can you hear me?
Totally.
Oh, good. I'm off of mute. Well, thank you so much for inviting us to come and share stories today, and to all of you attending to being part of the conversation. And I moved to Jefferson County 6 years ago when I was invited to come serve as the executive director of the Northwest School of Wooden Boat Building. And as I think you folks know, we are located on the south end of Port Townsend Bay in Port Hadlock. And the school has deep roots in Jefferson County. It was founded 40 years ago by right here in the boatyard in Port Townsend by one of this community's icons of service, Libby Palmer, and her husband, Henry Yaton, and boatwright Bob Prothero. And as you folks know, many graduates of the school work in the local marine trades, which we now know fuels about 20% of our local economy. Some of the graduates run businesses like Haven Boat Works and Shipwrights Co-op in Port Townsend, and others have founded related businesses like Edensaw or Brent Davis Construction. Some of our alums even run kindred spirit nonprofits like Heron Scott, leading the Port Townsend School of Woodworking. So our mission may come up on the screen in just a moment. There it is. Our mission is to teach and preserve boat building and marine system skills while developing the individual as a craftsperson. If you look at the pictures, you'll see that people are learning to use their hands to do things. And there are often multiple people working on the same project. Needless to say, this kind of learning does not lend itself to 100% distance learning environment.
Let's see, we're still just seeing your first slide.
Oh, I'm so glad that you told me that. Screen sharing is paused. Oh, well, I'm going to stop share and try sharing again. Welcome to Zoom, one and all.
It
Let's
is
see.
never a perfect universe.
Are you seeing the mission slide now?
We are.
Okay, so now you're seeing people working with their hands and in groups, doing things that do not lend themselves to distance education. So the first big problem we faced is the school was shut down for 3 months, April, May, June. And the next question was, how do we reopen and teach hands-on education and still keep people safe in the midst of a pandemic? I'm going to try to advance to the next screen and see if it works. Are you seeing something that says programs?
We are.
So I am proud to say not only did I advance to the next screen, but more importantly, in July 6th, we reopened to students. And the 3 programs had students graduate just around Thanksgiving. And boy, were we proud. It took a lot to get through that 6 months of instruction. And we couldn't have done it without the students who demonstrated a lot of resilience and a lot of attention to all the new protocols. But we also couldn't have done it without a team that was consistently scrappy, inventive, and resilient. Now, our challenge wasn't just to reinvent the shops and classroom and how we're teaching in the pandemic. We also needed to stay in close communication with the various agencies we need to stay in compliance with, because in fact, we are an institution of higher education. We are a .edu. So we work closely with the Federal Department of Education, and they're the ones that allow students to use federal student aid to attend our school. And we work closely with a national accreditor for vocational schools. And so we needed to stay in touch with them about best practices, and our state licensing agency and the Department of Veteran Affairs, both state and nationally. And of course, also all the health guidance coming out from the governor's office as well as locally. But as I was reflecting about today's presentation, I am aware that we're focusing on strategies that help the boat school navigate the pandemic, just through a desire to share what we've learned. But I don't want to pretend that it hasn't been hard. The constant uncertainty has been and continues to be difficult. The search for definitive information has been and continues to be challenging. And living days from behind a mask has been and continues to be uncomfortable and sometimes annoying. Yet, as hard as it has been and continues to be, I recognize that we are privileged to still have livelihoods, to live in a place that has a relatively lower COVID incidence rate, to live in a place we can get outside, and to live within such a caring community. I don't want our sharing of lessons learned to in any way diminish our understanding of the very heavy toll the pandemic has taken both locally and around the world. And I'm going to ask you to join me in taking a few moments of silence to honor those who have died, who have lost loved ones, who have lost their livelihoods, and who, like many of you, have shouldered incredible new stresses during this difficult time. So, a moment of silence. Thank you. The pandemic created problems. We had to solve a lot of problems, and we tackled that as a team. And you're going to hear from Sonia Matthews, our board president, who brought a career's worth of executive corporate experience to questions like, what does leadership need to look like during a pandemic? How can board and staff work together to address these issues? How do we manage organizational communication when we can no longer get together? Leland Gibson graduated from the boat school years ago, worked in the trade here in Port Townsend, came back as an instructor. Our instructors were the front line at the boat school and had to answer questions like, well, how do you teach hands-on when there's social distancing? How do we determine what the best practices are to follow to promote safety? And how do we engage the students to be part of the solution? If you can imagine, for Laura, she started her job mid-pandemic with us. So we're already, trying to grapple with a lot of these issues. And she came up to speed so quickly and helped us address questions like, how do we stay in touch with prospective students if they can't come to the school anymore, or have open houses at the school? How do we stay in touch with donors if we have to cancel our long-standing events? In fact, how do we celebrate graduation if nobody can come in from out of town? So I'm excited for you to meet your neighbors, who are people that I am really honored to work with. So Sonia, over to you. And you are on mute.
So I was telling Arlene that the quote of the year for 2020 was "you're on mute." I think Zoom is a great word, and it's also a word that's driven us all crazy in one form or another. Arlene, you started out by talking about how time has really changed since this pandemic. Believe it or not, we're just over a year. January 21st was the first reported US COVID case. The first two COVID casualties were the 26th of February. And Inslee closed public schools, which was preempt to our closing our schools on March the 13th. So at the time, we all thought this pandemic was just a little hiccup. In other words, it would only last a few months. In fact, when Inslee first announced school closings, he had it through April 24th. And we at the time thought that was a really long time. When I went back in preparation for this talk, I looked at some of the scenarios we'd planned. And we were looking at a 1-week closure, a 2-week closure, and a 2-month closure. And we thought, wow, 2 months is a really long time. What are we going to do? Well, we didn't open again until about 4 months later. But just to give you an idea as far as time compressing, we call the period of time in March, what is happening. And that was really descriptive of the confusion that we felt, the lack of data that Betsy talks about. Nobody had any living memory of what you do during a global health pandemic. There were no rules. It was a permanent state of normlessness or anomie. And so what we did as board members and as staff is try to wrap our heads around keeping the school safe and really fulfilling our mission. We are a school, and we know that quality education for our students is our end goal, and that's our role. So we may not have been able to have the bylaw description of what to do in a pandemic, but we knew what our objective and our purpose was, and that really helped. If we're not providing students with a quality education and staff with a good work environment, then we're not serving our functions. So what we did as a result, with a lot of stress, to Betsy's point, is we relied on familiar disciplines that were augmented by digital technology. So first, let me start with what we did that was very familiar to us. What was familiar to us is our commitment to quality education and continuous improvement, relentless, iterative, continuous improvement. We continued to operate off of a strategic plan made up of stretch goals, action steps, and metrics for measuring the impact. We slowed down on some efforts, we sped up on others, and then we added new COVID-based requirements. Because we're committed to that continuous stretching, testing, and iteration, the pandemic's response was just another problem to solve, although it was much, much, much bigger, more dire, more urgent than any other. And this insight didn't really come to us until much later. At the time, we were just pivoting with ninja-like agility, trying to figure our way out of this crisis. So continuous planning is something that we did and needed to continue to do, but we needed to move faster and with more transparency. And so that's one of the new tools. Tool one that we're all on right now is Zoom. We only met face-to-face as a school. We like each other. We like to hang out at the school. It's a beautiful place. We've gotten much needed investments from the state and the government to refine our campus, make it a better place to work. It's gorgeous. But when you're in the middle of a global pandemic and you can't be in the same room as one another, you have to figure out what the digital solution is, and we use Zoom. It gave us the FaceTime we were accustomed to, but the immediate and germ-free access we needed. We met weekly at first as the situation developed, then bi-weekly, and then now for routine business and exception-based topics. You'll hear other ways we apply the technology from Leland and Laura. Tool two that we used is actually also ending with OOM to be a little confusing. It's called Loom. We knew that we needed to move very quickly and with decision-making that not everybody was able to receive the data for at the same time. So Loom, if you've not heard of it, allows for recording and sharing messaging from the computer screen, which really helps us to provide both the content and the narrative regarding the complex issues to inform our work sessions and voting. And as a bonus, it's also shareable with external partners and advocates to inform them how we're coping with the pandemic. So many have responded to our situation. Betsy acknowledged that at the very beginning. They had helpful advice and resources, and Loom helped us to tell our story with detail and with efficiency and on their terms. So the OOMs are still helping us get our work done. We have not had a face-to-face board meeting since March 12th of 2020. The impact of the changes, just with regards to the leadership and the staff, we've got better board and staff teamwork and accountabilities. I call it battle buddies. We've been through a lot together, and we're still in battle. And I think that we're a stronger team as a result. We have broader reach and connectivity to board members and other school advocates because location is not a barrier anymore. We're considering board members in other countries in different time zones. It's really helped to expand. I think you'll hear more examples from Leland, Laura, and Betsy about how our messaging and coursework has transcended now the physical boundaries. It's really great. We're better now at rapid scenario planning and response. And so ultimately we have better institutional agility. And then finally, it confirmed good business practices established during a period of stability work really well in a crisis. We are a school, ironically, steeped in tradition, but also one who is using digital to help augment our continuous planning and improvement. But finally, we have an amazing staff at the school. I highly recommend that if you're going to go through a global pandemic with an organization, you work with people like them. And with that, I'd like to hand it off to Leland Gibson. He's the boat building instructor for the school. He's going to give you line of sight as to the changes in campus and curriculum that occurred. Thank you.
Thanks, Sonia. Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Leland Gibson. I've been a teacher at the school for, I think it was around 3 years. And yeah, this has been good. It kind of brought back kind of all those feelings from a year ago, and kind of like that just uncertainty of just like massive uncertainty. I mean, like it was, for me, it was beyond like, is the school still going to exist? It was like, is civilization as we know it still going to exist to a certain extent? But everything settled down, and we was able to start focusing on the school and kind of like moving on with life again. Yeah, so the school was shut down for students for 3 months, but after 7 weeks, the staff came back and started coming back on campus. And what we do at the school, we've been doing in some we've been doing it in a pretty similar way since the early 80s. And it was really hard to envision at first kind of how we were going to work in the parameters that we were still figuring out the parameters. What we actually teach is we teach problem solving and kind of teamwork, and it's people working really closely with each other, and the boats they just kind of show up incidentally to what else is going on there. And like how are we gonna kind of keep this teaching style and kind of like this close this like kind of like close knit way of working going while we're like adhering to the mitigation principles we had set up. So that was a big challenge. And but I mean, and at first it just kind of seemed like we couldn't do it. But the staff, we came back on campus, and we also found out that there are 3 other boat building schools in the country that we hadn't really been communicating with much at all, and we're in pretty much the same boat that we were. So we started communicating with them, and we came up with kind of a set that between talking to them and talking to kind of like the local public health agencies, we came up with kind of a working mitigation plan. And I was kind of like the COVID safety officer in charge of it. And the important thing was, like, if you go to a supermarket every couple of weeks, you know, I mean, you can kind of obey whatever parameters they put out for a couple minutes. But we needed something simple and effective and relatively safe that people could do for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. And so we just kept it really simple and really basic. Masks at all times, distance, and just washing hands and kind of isolating tools and whatnot. And just kind of like the more we were learning about COVID, the more we were talking to people, it was just like, this is what works, just kind of keep airflow and keep people apart and keep masks on. And well, we did have quite a few tests and quite a few scares. There were no positives and no outbreaks at the school for I think it was 4 months that we were operating. So that was, yeah, so we put that plan in place, and we came back, we came back a little bit early, just to see if it would work. Like, the staff came back and we just started adhering to this plan and seeing if it would work. And then once we had the plan in place for just first and foremost was safety, and then it was how can we teach? Because we also have an agreement with the students. They actually pay quite a lot of money to be there, and we provide them with a syllabus, and we agree to teach them certain things, and we tell them that they are able to go out into the workforce after that. So we couldn't just have them come back and not provide the things that we say that we were going to provide. So we had to figure out how to kind of change our teaching practices to still provide those things. And part of it, there is our head instructor, Sean Kuhlman, does an amazing thing. He gets up every morning and stands at a chalkboard for 1 to 2 hours and draws parts of a boat in 3 dimensions with chalk. And by the end of a year, with all of those drawings, you've seen every piece of a boat and how it goes together just drawn on a chalkboard. And that was all in person, sitting in a classroom. And we couldn't do that anymore. So he switched over to Zoom and another video editing platform that I think Laura's going to get into a little bit later. So we had online lectures, and we handed out tablets just to make sure that everybody had. It wasn't a requirement before, it is going to be now, that everybody has just a way to view media online. And then we got into the other 6 or 7 hours of the day is just spent in the shops, just working hands-on building boats. And usually, it's a 14-foot boat with 4 people just piled on top of each other. So we couldn't do that anymore. So we came up with more projects, and we spread people out and came up with all of these procedures to kind of move people around. And this wouldn't have worked without the students being completely into it. At any point, they could have just said no. But everybody was into it, and everybody, it's that kind of teamwork and community building. Everybody was working together because they knew that this is the only way that everybody was going to get through it. So we broke them down, spread everybody apart. At one point, we even we were running 2 different programs, a traditional and a contemporary program. We combined the 2 different programs under one of our instructors, a veteran instructor who's been there quite a few years, and we got a lot out of that. So we were teaching traditional and contemporary programs in the same shop, 2 different students, and the students loved it. And now we're starting to look at just kind of things that are happening after COVID. Now we're kind of starting to look at how do we maybe introduce a little bit more of this type of learning into what we're doing. It was, it's kind of interesting. The school's been around for 40 years now. As I see, there's a new logo, which I hadn't seen yet. It's it's been around for 40 years, and it's like all of these systems have just kind of slowly been layered on top of each other as like instructors and administrators come and go, and it all worked. But this was the first time we had ever really been, I mean, you don't change until you have to. This has been the first time we had ever really been forced to like re-examine a lot of how we were doing things. And also in our new systems class, we had to, there were usually, how it was done before was everybody was paired up and they would work on mock-up boards together, but we couldn't do that anymore. So everybody got their own mock-up boards, and the support for that was so overwhelmingly positive that we're not going to go back to the pairs anymore. So it was just like all of these things that we probably wouldn't have examined otherwise, but we were forced to examine, worked out really positively for us. And also like with the online lectures, and it kind of really forced us to, all of us to start looking at technology a little bit more. I mean, I'll be honest, I was in the shops pretty much nonstop before the pandemic. And I would get on a computer twice a quarter to do grades, maybe every once in a while to do some ordering. One of the first things we did when we came back in those 7 weeks was all the instructors built themselves offices in their shops to kind of like sequester themselves. We put a computer in, we started getting acquainted with Zoom, we got gimbal holders for our phones so that we could start doing boat tours. And we also had a bunch of students that were just kind of sitting here going crazy wondering when we were going to open the school back up. So we had this kind of captive audience for kind of this experimenting with the technology. And so a couple times a week, we would just kind of like invite everybody to a Zoom and just kind of like wander around with a gimbal camera. Or at one point I was like co-hosting my own meeting and was on a computer and on my phone and trying to walk around with the phone. It didn't work at all. I mean, the bandwidth just does not support that. But I don't know. I mean, the experimenting was good, and it was kind of pushing us to kind of look at how we had done things before. And like we have, all of a sudden we realized we're able to bring in guest speakers from all over the country. And we're able to take boat shop tours from boat shops all over the country. So all of a sudden it broadened our horizon hugely. And that was really exciting. Like we never would have thought about that before, because before like all of our classroom side of stuff was just in that, in the actual classroom with the chalkboard. Yeah, what else? Yeah, there was, so a lot of positives came out of that we're kind of still looking at. And these changes are going to go far beyond the pandemic. So it was, I mean, it was hard. And it was, I mean, I don't want to underplay just like the constant stress wasn't really sustainable, I don't think, in the long term. But kind of like through all of it, we were finding out a lot of kind of like positive long-term changes for kind of like how we did things. And it also kind of made us more tight-knit as kind of like an organization, because I feel like we had to all of a sudden the decisions that we made individually infected kind of everybody. And so the instructors were constantly talking to each other about like, should we do this? Can we, like, is this okay? Because we had to kind of all act in unison for the safety of all. And so, yeah, we have a lot better kind of like lines of communication now as well. I think at this point, I'm just going to kind of start rambling. So I'm going to pass it over to Laura. Thank you all.
Okay, let's pull up my slides. Can everyone see that slide? Okay, great. So really, I'm Laura Prendergast. I'm the marketing manager. I did start halfway through the pandemic, and I'm going to touch more on that in a little bit. But I will say I was very impressed with the decision making and how it was navigated from a leadership standpoint when I came on board. And I definitely felt like, oh, wow, I came in a few months in, everyone seemed to really have dialed communication and was holding space really well. So I was feeling like I'd landed at a good place to be navigating a pandemic, especially for a new job. So basically what we're talking about is hands-on learning in a hands-off pandemic. And what the school teaches here is problem solving. So basically, as you heard Leland say, the boats are just the medium for this process of learning to problem solve. So as the instructors were teaching problem solving, there were some major problems to be solved. So it was really this multi-layered onion effect. Is that advancing? There. So that's actually Leland. Do you guys see that next slide now? Yep, okay. That's Leland teaching. You can see how everyone's spaced and has their masks on. The doors are open, there's airflow. I think everyone was hoping we could definitely graduate by Thanksgiving, which we ended up making that cutoff just barely. The smoke rolled in at one point and we had to close classes for that. And so then we were biting nails. Are we actually going to be able to graduate everyone by Thanksgiving? It's getting cold in the shops, so there's all this anxiety, I guess, as Leland was touching on. It's just like, is this going to work? Can we make this happen? We bought the filters, but they were really loud and they were making it hard for people to even hear each other. So having the doors open just seemed like the best solution. There's the electrical boards and kind of the setup in the marine systems classroom. So we used to have 2 students on a board, and this shows just one. Okay, so the other thing we teach is using the right tools for the job. So students learn to use hand tools, they learn to use power tools, and that makes them a more efficient boat builder. So we definitely learned some new tools and as we navigated COVID. This is a great quote I love. Quit sending millennials things to print at home. We don't have a printer, and if we do, we haven't found the power cord from our last move. We have been surviving on secretly using our work printers for years. So this was just a random person's tweet that struck a chord with so many people that it racked up 250,000 likes within a few hours. And it was definitely a barrier that we came up against. So one of the tools that we found was Docusign. And that removed a barrier for our students. It made it easier for staff to get signatures for our accreditation process. It uses a waterfall system where it kind of passes the paperwork around, the digital paperwork. So if Betsy needs to sign it, and then it needs to go on to Heidi, then it can go from there to the students. So it's been a great tool that we probably should have started using sooner, but COVID encouraged us to do that. And that is kind of the trend that we're seeing that's also having an environmental impact. The swing towards digital, driven in part by the habits of the younger generation, is accelerating this year because of the effects of COVID. Market research firm IDC has predicted that the number of pages printed worldwide will fall by more than 13% in 2020, saving the equivalent of 7 football fields worth of paper every minute of every day. I was amazed to read that. Some more photos in the shop, just showing how students worked on opposite sides of the boats. Some other silver linings. Excuse me. We had expanded reach via our master classes, expanded community collaboration. We also worked with the Northwest Maritime Center for the first virtual Wind Boat Festival. Sean kicked it off with his locked-in class, which was a condensed version of a lecture series that I can't remember the amount of time. I think normally it's a few weeks that he spends on that. But we did it for the master classes as well, so that was hugely successful, and it was a great way to collaborate with the community. We also are so grateful to Rebecca, who's on this call, because we worked with her on our virtual fundraiser. We had never done an online fundraiser before, so we piloted that, and she was huge in sharing everything they learned from their online fundraiser. So it was really a neat way to see the community collaborating more, working together. We used hand sanitizer that was made locally by Boat School alum Admiralty Distillers. And we did our first ever virtual graduation, which meant that family members from all over the world could attend. We had, I think, family from 8 different countries, including Romania, Indonesia, and a number of others who I can't even remember. While I heard one instructor say he missed being able to hug students at the end of it, it was still tearful and beautiful. And I think we will probably always do some kind of online graduation because it allows for so many people to participate. And yes, in future, I think everyone would love to see something in person too, because it's just getting that human connection. There's only so much you can get through Zoom, but having the ability to show a slideshow from the year for family members to see what it looked like and all the projects they worked on, it was a beautiful thing. And seeing students getting tearful and calling this year the crazy best experience of their life, you really saw just how much the students were really on board and helping to navigate this huge challenge. I mean, they really were part of the problem solving. This is the Clean Bay boat that Sonia also has as her background. It's the cleanest pump out boat. It's 0 emissions. So they're working on that. This is the last photo taken on the last day before students graduated. And I love this shot showing them all social distance in the frames of the full boat. I will say that I touched on earlier how when I started, I was impressed by how decisions were arrived at. And I think one of the first meetings that I jumped in on, the instructors were asked to decide if they should have another cohort of students come in. And they all basically put their jobs on the line, saying that no, we needed to postpone this year because we needed to focus on the experience of last year's students. And I was just so touched and so impressed that the focus really was about the students the whole time, their safety, their education, and people were willing to put their own needs aside so that could be prioritized. Also, watching Betsy navigate this as a leader, I found very impressive because, I'm gonna stop there. She really created space and let people share their thoughts, and she didn't make an executive decision. She kind of put it to the group and said, I just want everyone to kind of say what your thoughts are, and let's all pass this around and come to a decision together. And so I thought that was a really beautiful way to see decisions made, and it made me proud to be here and be a part of this. And it's been a challenging year, and yet there were a lot of wonderful lessons learned. So I'm going to pass it back to Betsy.
With the ongoing nature of the pandemic and the response to the pandemic, there continue to be opportunities and challenges. One of the opportunities that has emerged are the funds that are going into COVID relief. And as you know, there's an interest on the Olympic Peninsula in us building more jobs related to the trades and skilled workers. And for that reason, some COVID relief funding that had gone to the Economic Development Administration, a portion was awarded to the boat school this week, and we have nearly $450,000 we'll be able to invest in new equipment for our marine systems program. And you can see, we learned to survive a pandemic, we need each person on their own equipment. But as Leland mentioned, it's also better learning for everyone to have their own equipment. So an opportunity through COVID relief funding is helping us build the capacity of our program and improving the quality of it for everybody. A second opportunity from our end is that a lot of people appear to be rethinking their livelihoods. some people forced into it by losing their jobs, and other people just it being a soul searching sort of time. We opened applications for next October's classes this month. We opened them January 15th. And so far, we've received 38 applications from around the country. And that's on top of the 20 people that we postponed from this year to bring them back this coming fall instead. So we're seeing really strong interest in the programs. Also, we're seeing really strong demand from employers because it turns out, as crazy as COVID is, maritime industry in the Pacific Northwest is up about 5%. So there's a lot of demand for our graduates. In summary, I think you've heard that it's been challenging, but there have been some silver linings. It's caused us to think about using new tools digitally, setting up shops differently, figuring out how to record these lessons that have been taught for 40 years so the lecture portion can be delivered online and have the whole focus of hands-on, or the whole focus of time at the school being around hands-on project work. We have built new collaborations that will sustain beyond the pandemic with the other boat building schools, with some of the community partners. The teamwork, the communications internally, practicing the things Sonia was talking about, faster scenario planning, continued systematic planning, continuous improvement. We're going to keep incorporating the virtual part of some events just to that geographic scope so we can continue to broaden who our community is at the boat school. If we were in a real-time room and everyone was here, I love doing something, the popcorn thing, where you just reflect for a moment of something you heard, a phrase, a thought. And I'm wondering if you guys would consider playing in the chat and just say, we've closed our presentation and we'll answer questions. But before we do, I would love it if people just put in the chat some phrase or some idea that you picked up today that resonated for you. And let's see if people can get there into the chat. It's over to you. It's your turn. Okay, I personally don't see anything of, oh, yes, I see. Millennials don't have printers. Thank you, Sam. Yes. Yes. Ooh, an onion effect. Thank you. Those are awesome reflections. And Arlene, I hand the gavel over to you. I don't know how you like to do questions and answers or use the rest of the time, but it's sure been a treat to be able to come and share stories.
Well, actually, the treat is all ours because your story is even more fabulous than we knew before you came. So we know when we put it up on YouTube that we will have a lot of people watching that and participating going forward the same way you do, because we also reach people all over the country who are fascinated with what we do here in the Pacific Northwest and how we do it. And it never ceases to amaze me the geographic boundaries that have been enhanced by this pandemic for many of our organizations. So thank you for sharing everything you've done. And I'm not seeing a lot of questions in the chat. So while we have you here, anybody with questions for Betsy or her team, they've got great information. This is a good place to ask.
This is Erica. I'm sorry I was late to the presentation, Betsy, but I was hoping to hear, and maybe you covered it earlier, if there was what has happened with some of the on-site, I mean, you were doing on-site teaching in at schools. I think I'm specifically thinking of Nia Bay.
Oh, right.
Right, before the pandemic hit, and have those classes had to discontinue or?
So the initiative that Eric is referencing is we've gotten some grant funding to adapt our new marine systems curriculum, portions of it, for a high school audience, high school shop classes. And we've been partnering with Nia Bay High School. They have a wonderful shop teacher on the development of that. And so there's a yes and a no in terms of our response on this. In a lot of ways, we have not moved forward developing that curriculum because Billy wasn't teaching in the school at Nia Bay. And also we were so busy focusing on survival and adapting that project just, we couldn't put energy on it. But the positive side is I got to go back to the funder, and they agreed to a year extension on the grant, and we got a subsequent year's grant as well. And I said, we want to change to developing a flipped classroom model for high schools, which is flipped classroom means you read the material or watch the video at home, and then when you get to school, you do the discussion or the hands-on stuff. So this is for shop class. So now we will be able to put the resources into building materials that students can watch or learn from at home, and then when they get into the school, they can do hands-on. And just given this pandemic, doesn't seem like it's stopping anytime soon. The fact that that foundation was willing for us to switch gears and do more with video and do more online feels like an opportunity. So I haven't figured out where exactly that fits in the workflow for this year, but I'm thrilled that we've been given more time and a chance to adjust given COVID. Thanks for asking.
That's wonderful.
Nice job asking a question. I want to give you good feedback in case anyone else maybe wants to ask a question.
All right.
Oh, looks like there's two in the chat. The first one is from Rebecca. She says, what's on the horizon that you're excited about?
Oh, I'd like to defer that to the class. I mean, to the others on the team here. Leland, Laura, and Sonia, can you please answer that question? What's on the horizon you're excited about? Leland, do you want to kick it off?
I am, so I'm not coming back to the school till September. But I am really excited to kind of implement, we're having a lot of time to think now and kind of implement kind of the online learning platform that we're investing in, and kind of like just this new way of doing things. Yeah, so I'm just,
thank you. That's
yeah.
awesome. Laura, Sonia.
I'm excited about the digital application to activate and strengthen our alumni network. We have a lot of great alums over the last 40 years, and we want to connect with them, hear their stories, and figure out how we can help them. That's the first one. The second one is we have so much institutional knowledge. I want to continue to leverage the tools that we have to make sure that we protect and continue to build on them.
And I'm going to add that since it's our 40th anniversary, we're going to be celebrating by sharing stories from our alumni. And so I'm excited to help communicate those stories as we celebrate 40 years.
I have a very short horizon that I'm excited about, and that would be April. In April, we hope to, we have a class starting April 6th for Marine Systems. We have 18 students. So we've grown the size of the class, and we have a waiting list. It's in a brand new building. that we are aiming to have certificate of occupancy for by then. We will have purchased some portion of that $450,000 worth of equipment and have it on hand for the students. We have our second full-time instructor hired. He started this week and he's wonderful and he's going to be helping teach the students. So work that's been going on for like 3 years, oh no, 4 years. 4 years ago, we didn't have any cash, instructor, curriculum, or equipment for Marine Systems program. And it's all coming to, I mean, we've been teaching some cohorts, but now it's all coming together in April. Thanks to certain people on this call, like Erica from Craft 3 and others. Thank you. Oh, there's another question. What lessons have been learned from the fundraising shift to virtual? Well, I could start with one. We had a development committee this week. Everybody wants to go back to in person. Zoom fatigue is real. And people are like, let's not try to use online technology to do things that are better in person. Instead, let's use online technology to do things that are better online, like peer-to-peer fundraising that transcends geographic range, or telling stories through video, or whatever it is. So I just have to say, the development committee, everybody was like, we're going back to live in the spring of 2022. And then the next breath was, no, it's going to be a hybrid. It's going to be live plus online. So it's like, keep the good from the online, but go back to human. I don't know what it's going to look like. We're going to have to talk to Rebecca about that. Do any of you guys want to respond to the fundraising question?
No, I think you nailed it.
Okay. Are there other questions in there? No.
I think you have answered people's questions and given them a lot to think about. I think we all have a lot to think about. You're doing absolutely fabulous work. And Deb just wrote the same thing, but much more eloquently into chat. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just think that this organization is a shining star example of how to turn a disaster into fabulous opportunity. And sometimes we see the opportunities and we don't capitalize on them.
Mhm.
And in today's arena, that's almost criminal and will cause your organization to fail. So you have exceeded probably everyone's expectations for what can be done in a pandemic. And I'm going to thank you not only for doing that and for coming on and doing that, but for all of the training that you're doing not in this community and the jobs that you are creating. It is fabulous and we are blessed. So thank you all. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You know, enjoy this great year that you're building and come back and check in with us because we want to hear more about what's going on. So thank you guys. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.